Good evening, everyone, and happy Tuesday. Hope everyone is doing well. Hope everyone who this applies to had a wonderful first day of school. Whether you are sending kidlets off to school, or if you're like me that's got kids that have started new college programs, all that good stuff. Happy first day of school. I know my nieces don't start until tomorrow. You know, it's a weird time of year when things are moving around, shaking around, but before you know it, we will be back into routine. And while we're talking about routines and basics, we thought that we would take the whole month, take all the learning lives this month and revisit some of the basics that are part of this hobby and this craft that we love. So tonight I'm going to be talking to you about stamping. You might be a veteran stamper, and so if you have additional tips and tricks as I'm going along, please do put them in the comments, because we can all learn. We can all learn from each other. But if you are fairly new to stamping, maybe you have never stamped before, maybe you're afraid of stamping, then this live here tonight is for you. So we're going to do a little bit of talking, but I really want to focus this on making while we're talking. So, excuse me, and already my voice is going a little bit, so bear with me. I apologize for the frog in my throat. There we go, a little bit better. All right, so where to begin? Because stamping is a lot. There's a lot to know about stamping, and tonight we're just going to scratch the surface. Primarily, there are two types of stamps that we offer at the Papercrafters workshop, and I think you would argue that most crafting stores in our industry offer these two main types. Let's do this. So these guys here, and this is one of the new sets from Pink and Main. This one is called Batty for You. This is what you would call a clear polymer stamp. It is made from a polymer, hence the name. To make it clear, oh, why can't I get this out now? I should have got this out ahead of time. Nope, I got it. That'll do it. So it is made of a polymer, hybrid type material that allows it to be clear. My understanding is that these are made using molds that they pour the polymer into the mold to make the stamp into the image or the shape that you hope to stamp. The benefit to this is, well, the clear, and I will show you the clear in, the real benefit to the clear is that you can see through as you're stamping. So if you are trying to position something in the right spot, if you're trying to restamp, which is maybe not something I necessarily recommend, or if you're just trying to find a good position, then that clear aspect to this makes it really, really versatile and valuable. Polymer is also less expensive. You can get more on a stamp set than you can on a rubber stamp for the same-ish price. The downside being it is a softer material, so therefore you don't always get the same level of detail. So that, in contrast to what I would call a red rubber stamp, they do come in gray. I've seen it in teal. I have seen it in other colors, but primarily you're going to see it in red rubber. It has this foam layer to it. There is still a cling element to it, so you can use it on your MISTI. You can use it if you have a large enough block, that kind of thing. It's all perfect. But the advantage to the red rubber is it is actually etched out of the rubber. The rubber is a firmer, more dense material, so you can get a greater level of detail. That's really the primary difference between a red rubber and a clear polymer. Now, red rubber is what you used to see back in the day on the wooden blocks. They have now really embraced the cling technology, which will just make all your tools whether you're using polymer or the red rubber, really come together, and you don't have to buy a whole vast array of tools. You can get by with, a fairly minimal amount of tools. So, we're just going to go ahead and make a couple of cards. And as we do, I am going to talk through some more of these elements, going to talk through some tips and tricks. And, I find I'm better by doing than just sitting here talking to you. And it's probably more interesting for you as well. So I am going to start with a Halloween card, and then we will do more of a winter Christmas type card. All right, let's start with the polymer. These little guys here, I'm going to stamp a couple of images onto a piece of white card, because typically when they're open like this, when it's an open pattern like this, they're designed to be colored in. Now you can use watercolors, you can use pencil crayons. I've got a stash of Copic markers that I tend to use. And so to start off, let's go right back to the basics, that if you only had one tool, you would be looking to use, I'm just trying to find a good one here. Go right here, a clear acrylic block. I think I need one a little bit bigger. And I'm lucky that from my stash, I have quite a selection of blocks, so I can pick out ones that are going to fit. Yeah, let's go with that guy. So for a clear polymer stamp, you're going to remove this backing card. Now, one tip that I like to use is I'll take some washi tape. I've got this nice wide Best Ever craft tape from Spellbinders. I'm going to take just a swatch of that. And what I'm going to do is this. I'm creating a hinge with my top card and my backer card, because often these little backer cards come separate, and if you don't put that tape on there, you could lose it. It's very easy to lose that piece of acetate. So I like to create that hinge that very first time, just to make sure I don't lose it. And now I'm going to peel off. So you do need to be a little bit gentle. Sometimes that first time you pull this off, you may need to give it a little bit extra oomph. If you really have to get in there with both hands and both feet, you're probably pulling too hard. So don't tear it. You do have to be careful that you don't tear it. And no, I do need a slightly bigger block. Block number 3. See, you know what? If you have a stash, it's helpful. But the thing to remember is buy blocks based on the stamps that you're buying. And my recommendation is to buy the biggest block that will cover the biggest stamp, because if it will fit a big stamp, it will fit a small stamp. So you will get there. Now with the clear polymer stamps, you do have to do what they call season your stamps the first time you do this. You don't have to do it every time, just the first time you use the stamp. And there are a couple of different ways you can do it. You could take just a white eraser that you get from Staples or the dollar store or the stationery store. You could take one of these goo erasers. That one's a little bit hard. Let's see if I've got a softer one. And what you would just do is you would just gently erase on that top level. You could do it here too with this one. So either one of these tools, what that does is it removes any residue that was left over in that manufacturing process, and it gets your ink or your stamp ready to accept the ink. Because you will find that, sometimes if you've got a brand new stamp, you're going to get some beading and you're going to get some stuff on when the ink is on your stamp, it's not going to look right, and it probably won't stamp cleanly that first time. So when you start a brand new stamp, also plan that you're going to do a couple of practice ones before you do your real one. Now, Matt's got a question.
What if I forget to do that and I just start stamping?
What if you forget to do that and you start stamping? Well, I would stamp, get all the ink off, clean it, and then go back and try and season it. Don't try to clean it when there's ink on it. And that's especially important because there is a third way that you can season your stamp. You can use your eraser, you can use the goo eraser, or if you have none of those at your disposal, you have a tool built right in, and that is your arm. You could just take this, rub it on your arm like this. Now you will get DNA, you will get skin cells, all that kind of stuff on your stamp. That's totally okay. But definitely make sure there's no ink on your stamp before you do this. Especially if it's blue, you could turn into a stamp or into a Smurf. Now, before you go, now that we've done this seasoning, before you go and apply ink, give it a little wipe with, I've just got my stamp chamois. I'll talk about this again in a second. Just some water. You don't need any special cleaners. And now your stamp is ready to go. Now, sometimes, depending on the stamp, you may need to season it 2 or 3 times. And definitely this is a case where you get what you pay for. If you are buying stamps at the dollar store, in that $1.50 bin at Michael's, some of those sites that we will not mention tonight, no matter what seasoning you do, you still may not get a clean stamp. But when you're paying, anything that you get from our store, 1 seasoning, you should be good to go. Oh, we got another question.
Kind of a two-parter.
Okay, you gonna put it up on the screen?
No.
Oh.
It's just, when you're rubbing it, I guess, like when you're doing that.
Yeah.
How long do you do that for? And is this a one-time application, or do you do this all the time?
Okay, so in case you didn't hear, the question is, if I'm gonna rub it on my arm or even use an eraser, how long do I do it? I mean, just a couple of rubs. You don't need a lot. If you're doing an eraser technique, I would say start at the top, go all the way to the bottom. Try and make sure you're getting all those nooks and crannies. Usually, and then you should, it's really only for the first time you use it. Once you start using it and start stamping away, you should not have to season it again. So that hopefully will answer those 2 questions. All right, so my little bat is all clean. The next question that I often get is, it's actually a 2-parter. What type of paper? What type of ink? Well, and to some degree, both of them, the answers to both of these depends on what you're using it for. But in my experience, for paper, you want a smooth paper. You can stamp on a textured paper, and that is going to give you a slightly more irregular look, because if your paper is textured, you're not going to get a nice, clean stamped image. So I tend to lean towards a nice smooth paper. This is Neenah 80-pound Solar White. When I'm stamping for coloring, when I'm stamping to die cut, the lighter paper is usually a little bit better. It's a little bit, even just more affordable from that standpoint. What type of ink? Well, with this guy, my intention is that I'm going to color him in. So I want to use an ink that is safe for my alcohol markers. That's the medium I'm going to use to color him in. So
the paper is also dependent on if you're coloring with markers versus watercolor versus.
That is correct. So if you are watercoloring your image, then you do want to have a paper that has a little bit more oomph to it, as well as can withstand the water. So, and this is where it gets tricky. If you're stamping on a watercolor paper, you might want to flip it over and make sure using the smoother side, or use something like a Tim Holtz Distress Heavy Stock that is designed to withhold the water. Okay, so as I said, I'm coloring with, or my intention will be to color with alcohol markers. So I've been coloring for well over 15 years, and I always go back to where I started from, and that is with Memento. Having said that, there are lots of other companies. So Concord, I believe, has a alcohol ink friendly ink. Gina does, Lawn Fawn does. Pretty much all the companies now have alcohol ink safe ink. So it is all kind of interrelated, but I'm going to use that Memento. If I was not going to color him in and I was going to just stamp in color, then I would choose just one of my basic dye-based inks to stamp him in. And you know what? I'm going to do him both ways so that you can see what they look like. Yeah, if I'm going to do him to go with black, let's grab a nice, fun orange to stamp him in. And of course, anyone who knows me, I'm going to choose Clementine to stamp him in.
Orange may not show up on camera very well. You might want like a red or.
Well, I want it to be Halloween, so it's all good. Okay. My car is I've got an orange little car. So if you're ever driving by the store and you see my orange little car in the parking lot, that's a pretty good chance that I'm there. But we call him Clementine. So Clementine is the perfect color for stamping. All right, I'm going to do Clementine first. And when you're using a cube, it is always easier to apply the ink to the stamp as opposed to the stamp to the ink. Neither way is wrong per se, but I just find I have more control to just pounce it around. When it's the ink cube, it is just a little bit easier when the ink is smaller than the stamp.
While you're doing that, someone did ask about versifying.
Versifying, I will talk about in just a little bit, so hang on to that question. So I've got this inked up, and when you're inking, really you just want to take a look at your image and make sure you've got all your areas covered. I'll get to the Misty in a little bit because that's a whole different stamping tool, but I just want to talk about the basics here first. So I've just gone around and made sure that that ink is completely covered. Now I do have a paper mat underneath me. You may also want a foam mat or a like a mouse pad or something like that. I think I'm actually just going to take the foam mat out of my Misty here to stamp onto. The foam mat gives you a little bit of extra cushion so that way you make sure you get really good coverage with your stamp. I'm going to turn it this way. When you've got your block, you're going to think about going straight down like this. Try not to rock. Well, like I just did. If you rock, it's going to move. It's going to get places where you don't necessarily want it. Though that one didn't actually turn out too bad. If you probably can't see on the camera, it did shift a little bit up here. So let's try that one more time. Now I'm using the same color, so I'm not even cleaning this off. I'm just going back in and gently pouncing. So really think about going straight down, straight up. You need to have firm pressure, but you do not need to get in there with your hands and knees and elbows and ankles and all that good stuff. I'm going to go straight down. Now, I didn't pull up right away. I'm letting this sit because the ink has to then absorb into the fibers of the paper. So it's always good to give it an extra couple of seconds. I've probably gone way too long here than what is needed, but then you pull up and look at how cute he is. Now I am going to switch to the black, and in this case I am going to change or clean this off. So to clean off any water-based, dye-based ink, which most of what we're going to be using tonight, that is the type of ink, all you need is a cloth with water. This is a stamp chamois from Lawn Fawn. I do also have my scrubber block from Hero Arts. Water is all you need. You do not need a special cleaner. There are special cleaners out there, but for regular everyday ink, you really don't need it. If you're really frugal, or if maybe you're just in a pinch, you can use baby wipes as well. Here are my warnings for baby wipes, and to some degree the stamp chamois as well. When you've got a wet cloth, don't just drop your cloth down. Find like the edge of your trash can, somewhere where you can leave it, because nothing is worse than completing a project and then putting it down on your wet cloth and ruining it. So you want to be very mindful of where you put that wet cloth, any cleaning supplies, so that it doesn't ruin your project as you're working on it.
How did you learn that?
I learned that the hard way many times. Whether it's I put the paper on the cloth or drop the cloth on the paper, you just want to be very mindful of that. Baby wipes too tend to dry out very quickly. So if you are using a baby wipe and it's drying out, you could get little white fibers stuck in all the nooks and crannies of your stamp. Not a big deal. It is just a bit of a challenge to clean. So what I would do is take the whole thing to my tap and rinse and gently brush off all those extra little fibers. And then make sure you change to a nice, clean, wet baby wipe from there.
So any cloth you use should be
lint-free.
Like a microfiber.
You could use a microfiber cloth as well. I do like the chamois. I keep going back to the chamois. Obviously, it feels like a chamois. It's a nice cloth. I cut my chamois in half. So these chamois are actually twice as big. But I find when I clean, I always aim for the center. So if I cut it in half and have two cloths, I then have two centers. And I'm going to make better use of my chamois. These chamois can also be thrown in the wash. So if you find that you've got extra ink in there or it's really getting mucky, throw it in the wash and you're good to go. All right, so I'm going to repeat. I'm going to do this one the opposite way because my memento pad is a little bit larger. So therefore, I'm now going to apply the stamp to the ink pad. A little bit easier when it is that bigger pad. But again, do that same kind of check. Make sure you're getting all the areas. And then once again, we're going to go straight down, hold, and then straight up.
It's harder when you actually try to do it purposefully.
It is a little bit harder. Now, I'm going to bring this up here. I don't know if you can see the solid part of his eyes didn't stamp super cleanly, even though I've done everything right. Couple things could be at play here. First of all, I still may just not have gotten enough ink on there. Second of all, sometimes it takes time for that ink to absorb into the paper and spread out. So don't stress if that happens to you right away. This is something that definitely will come with practice. But you can just say, you know what, that's a distressed look, or give it a little while. It could even out and smooth out as you're going along. When we get to the Christmas houses, it's the same thing. When you've got something solid, sometimes it just takes time to soak into those fibers. Okay, so that is the basics of stamping with a block and your ink pad. I think I'm going to switch now. Oh, and look, I must have had something on my hand because I smeared, but that's okay. I am gonna grab a baby wipe this time, make sure my hands are clean before I move on to the next step. So my next step, I'm gonna move on to the red rubber to do my background to go with my little, oh, you know what, before I do that, I'm gonna talk about sentiments and VersaFine because that was one of the questions there. There's lots of different kinds of inks out there. The ones we've been using here so far are what we would call a water-based dye ink. And there are slightly different formulations, which is why Memento works with alcohol ink and the Clementine or the Concord and Ninth regular inks, maybe not so much. Then you go into a VersaFine or a VersaFine Clear. When it comes to black, actually I got my VersaFine here. When it comes to black, these two are interchangeable. VersaFine came out first and they came out with dark colors. And when customers came to them and said, we want brighter, more vibrant colors, instead of just adding to the VersaFine palette, they created the VersaFine Clair line. However, they felt that even that new line needed a black. So VersaFine Clair Nocturne, VersaFine Onyx Black, I use interchangeably, and I could not tell you from looking at them when they're stamped which one is which. These are what this VersaFine is considered a pigment ink. So it is a slightly different formulation than these two guys. And it is designed, oh, I've got my label over top of it, but this is designed to be waterproof. So you can use it with watercolors, you can use it with wet techniques. And we on the PCW team just find that VersaFine or VersaFine Clair, they stamp details like nothing else. And I don't really know the reason why. We just find that you get better images, sharper details with this than you would with this. And I think it has something to how it absorbs into the paper, the formulation of it. But let me just show you. So I'm going to put that over there. I'm going to grab another card here. And let's do You know what, let's just do Happy Halloween. And this time I can use one of my smaller blocks before I put ink on it. Let's season it up. Clean all my dry skin off of that. It's putting a little bit of DNA on your project. And then once again, my pad is bigger than my stamp, so I'm going to apply. You don't have to push hard. You're better off to move it around or even do a little bit of a twist to get good coverage. And then once again, I'm going to go straight down. Let it hold and sit. Try not to rock. There's a very natural tendency to rock. Try not to rock. And then lift up and look at how crisp and clean and beautiful that is. So I think of Memento as my marker ink. I use my water base, whether it is Concord and Ninth or Pink Fresh or Gina K or my Lawn Fawn. Those are my colored inks. That's what I tend to use them for. And VersaFine is my sentiment ink. I use it almost exclusively for stamping sentiments.
Can you use VersaFine for images and color like it?
VersaFine you can use if you're going to watercolor. Do not use VersaFine with your alcohol inks. Yeah, with your markers. It is a waterproof ink. You use it with your watercolors. Do not use it with your markers. Okay, so let's switch. Let's talk about red rubber and let's talk about the Misty. So many, many years ago, as my son says, back when the world was black and white. Oh, we got a question before we go on.
Yeah, Darlene wants to see the sentiment stamp with Memento so you can see the difference.
Okay. I can do that for sure. Good idea, Darlene. Good idea. Okay, so where we go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do Memento, and then I will also do, this is just, no, that's the same as Memento. I'm going to do the Peacock, which is just a regular colored ink. It'll show up better than Clementine will. Okay, so again, it's clean. Twist, twist, pat, pat. Move it around, twist, twist, pat, pat. Let's give it a stamp.
And while you're doing that,
yep.
VersaFine take longer to dry than Memento?
I have not found that to be the case. I have not found, oh, I must have stuff on my fingers. I find them all very quick drying, all of these ones that I'm talking about tonight. If you're at all worried about any kind of ink, simply take your heat gun and give it a really quick blast. Okay, so that was the Memento. I'll bring it up close in just a second. Let's do Peacock. Oh. Sometimes you got to be careful with the little nooks and crannies, especially in a sentiment stamp. So that's where your scrubber might come into better play for cleaning. Nothing on my hands. Little ink this time, so ink applying to the stamp. And again, there's no wrong way. Nobody is going to take your ink away. If you have a little cube and you try to put your stamp in it, you're just going to find it's maybe not as easy. All right, so stamp down, straight down, try not to rock, let it soak in. The other thing, if you rock, if you have ink on your block, you're going to get it on the paper as well. All right, so let me bring this up close. Okay, so the top one was VersaFine. You can still see all the detail in the P, in between, in all these little loops and curves. Memento's not quite as black as the VersaFine is, and you're going to have softer edges because it is bleeding out into the fibers of the paper. And then that was a Peacock. It's not too bad, but
they're not terrible.
No, and you know what? They are certainly not terrible. If you were not comparing them, you probably wouldn't even notice the difference. It's just one of those things that over years and years of stamping, you get your favorites. And so VersaFine for me is my favorite for stamping sentiments. I'm going to see, what do I have on these other stamp sets? Oh, here's a good, oh no, let's do this one. So these ones have really delicate sentiments on them. Let's try one of those. Let's just do It's Fall. And a teeny tiny stamp or teeny tiny block. Now when you're doing, when you've got little stamps like this and you're seasoning, just make sure that it is really secure to your block and you're not too vigorous with this because they could go flying. So you just want to be nice and gentle. You also don't want to hurt yourself. So you don't want to rub so hard that you leave marks on your arm. All right, so let's just do, I'm not going to do the color this time. I'm just going to do, the more delicate the sentiment, the less hard you want to push. If you push too hard because the polymer is a little squishier, it could spread out. So you just want to be firm, but you do not need to be hard. And then let's do, okay. It's a little bit darker, but it is bleeding a little bit. So at the end of the day, it comes down to preference. All right, so those are our sentiments. Let me clean this one off and I will put it away later. Now you can see that I left this for a few minutes. I didn't clean it. I'm cleaning it now. It's generally going to come clean fairly easily. Be careful if you are using red, purple, and some blacks. They may stain your stamp. If you can do this and stamp off and leave nothing behind, your stamp is clean. It may not look clean, especially again, if you're using reds or purples, they will stain the polymer, but as long as you're diligent about cleaning, you are not going to, harm your stamp in any way. Okay, moving on. I think at this rate, we may not even get to the winter one. Let's just keep going with our yeah, okay. So as much as I said I wanted to create a project, we may not get there tonight, but we're gonna get there. We're gonna learn all the things. So here I've got red rubber, and you can see all the wonderful deep etching in this guy. And that really is the beauty of the red rubber. Between this one here, you're gonna get far more detail. But they're also larger, at least these sets are. So this is where you might consider investing in a MISTI. MISTI stands for, and I'm going to get it wrong, where's Most Incredible Stamping Tool Invented, I believe is what MISTI stands for. Anyways, it's a really cool tool. That's all you need to know. It's a stamping platform. So when I take my card, and this one, because I'm doing the Halloween, I'm going to do a gray piece of cardstock. There's no rule that says that you have to stamp on white. Now, because my stamp is larger than my paper, I believe these come in with your MISTI. You get a few of these little pads of paper. You could use copy paper too. You don't have to use the one that comes in your set. Oh, I've already got one here. I'll just reuse this one. I'm doing this just to help minimize how much I have to clean. So this is going in here. If I was using this guy, I would want my foam pad to go underneath. But because the red rubber stamp already has the foam built in, I don't need it. So this is going to go in here. And I'm going to take just a little bit of my tape, loop it around just so this doesn't move. And there we go. Keep it nice and flat. And I'm just going to pop it right here in the center. Typically you might come down the middle, but because my stamp is bigger than my paper, I'm going to go like this. I'm going to remove this from the carrier sheet, and I'm going to lay it down over top of my stamp.
Do you need to season these ones?
Red rubber you do not need to season. Because it is made with an etching process as opposed to a molding process, you do not need to season it. I don't think I cleaned him, so I just cleaned him there. All right, my stamp is in place over top of my paper. I'm just going to close this down and then open it up again. The reason why I'm not using the magnet, I'll use it just to hold the whole paper down, is because I want to cover this whole area. So if I had the magnet down, it would be in the way. I think I'm going to go back and I know I said that VersaFine was good for sentiments. It's my sentiment one. But again, because I like it for detail, then it is very appropriate for this one as well.
Could you use your grip mat to do that, or is it too thick because of the form?
Because you're using red rubber, the grip mat would be too thick. Okay, so this is a case where my stamp is bigger than my ink pad. So I'm just applying, and I'm going to very deliberately do a bad job. So I think now that I have inked everything, I'm going to squish it over. I do have a pressure tool here. You can, if you don't want to use a pressure tool, you could just take a cloth, just something that'll help your hand slide on the plastic. But I do like the pressure tool to get nice, even pressure across my whole stamp. Lift it up. Oh no!
Oh, you're a terrible stamper.
I did not cover all my stamp with ink. That is the primary reason that this tool exists, because now I can go back over it, be a little bit more diligent this time, get some good coverage, and then I go back again, and I can do this as many times as I need to. So much better. This has amazing detail, and especially with this one, I love that kind of tone on tone look. I think it'll look fantastic with our little bat once he's colored up and cut up. I still like that little black guy. So I'll finish that up after the live, and I will post the finished cards. But really, that is where the Misty comes into play, and that is the benefit of the red rubber. Look at how absolutely stunning that is. So that's ready now to be made into a card. These guys can be a little bit more difficult to clean, again, because there is so much detail. What I like to do is go and run it under the tap, rinse off all of the extra ink. I mean, you could use the stamp chamois on it and get it clean. That's actually not too bad, but I do find that if I run it under the tap, it gets into all those nooks and crannies a little bit better. Again, you could use your scrubby as well. All you need is water. Even with rubber, you do not need any fancy kind of cleaner. Okay, that is the open, what I will call the open face polymer, the coloring types of stamps where you've got all those guys. What about if you are using a more solid stamp? So let me get that out of the way. I'm going to put my foam back in, because the one I'm going to pull out is this holiday stamp from Hero Arts, where all of these houses are very solid. They're not meant for coloring. They're just meant for colored stamping. And sometimes they can be a bit of a challenge. I don't need the paper because I'm going to just take a full sheet of paper here and get these ready to go. So this time I am going to snug it down into the bottom right-hand corner. You could do the top corner as well. You really just want it in one of the corners so you can make sure that it's not going to move. It's as far in the corner as you can get. And now I'm going to put my magnet in place as an extra reinforcement. I'm going to pull out. Oh, and I didn't do my hinge. It's okay. I can do that later. What I might do before I put these in place, I'm just going to put each one on a block so I can season it. It's a little bit easier to season when it's on a block. Clean that off again. And you know what? I think intentionally, I still need a bigger one. My goodness, I'm not spatially organized tonight. So this one I'm not going to season. I'm going to show you what it looks like if you don't season it. And sometimes, you know what, sometimes it's fine. And sometimes it's not.
You're going rogue, are you?
I'm not going rogue. Okay, I'm going to use that peacock again because it's... So I don't know if you can see, it is not providing a smooth coverage on that stamp. And it may not be translating well. If you see that, it could mean that you haven't seasoned it. Sometimes, you know what, even when you apply it, the ink could smoosh out and smoosh together and still give you a decent stamped image. But it's really just a good habit, a good practice to get into to season it. So before I rub it on my arm, let's take the ink off, or Matt will be calling me Smurfette after the live. Let's give it a little season just to be safe. Nope, nothing on my arm. That's good.
Aren't you going to use the same?
Sorry?
Aren't you going to use the same ink?
I am, but while I'm getting these seasoned, I just don't want the ink open. All right, and then so I've got two houses. I've got this little mailbox. And I'm going to do the moon. Really just give it a good rub down. Okay, so I've now got my stamps prepped. Bring my Misty back. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place them face down. Am I on the screen here? Yeah. Face down on my paper. I'm going to be die cutting these, so positioning doesn't really matter. I just want to make sure I have enough space available to die cut them. And I may do these in different colors, so I also want a bit of space just to allow room for that ink pad. Okay, so I've kind of got them spread out. They are sometimes sticky on your fingers there. So if you have to, this is where I might take, my pokey tool and just kind of nudge it into place from the side. Let's close it over, rub it so that it sticks. Now that first time you may have your paper pull up. You haven't done anything yet, so that's okay. Snug it back into place. And then let's come over here, let's ink it up. So I'm going to do peacock for this one. I'm going to do midnight for this one. I'm going to do clementine for the moon. And I think I'm going to dig out a red for the mailbox. Where's my red? Okay, so here's a pro tip. I spent a little bit of time getting these colors in place, and there is the risk that they could dry out a little bit. This is where you're going to huff, and I mean that in the best possible way. All you're going to do is go, I know you couldn't see that, but I'm using the moisture from my breath to reactivate that ink and give it a little bit more moisture if you have let it dry for too long. All right, this is going to come down, my pressure tool. Okay.
See why that midnight color is so popular.
Yep, it is beautiful. Okay, so not perfect. This is where we can now go back in. Try to remember what colors you used. And this time I may just do one at a time. So I did my peacock, come back over. Much better. Let's do the midnight one. Bring it over. Just like if you were using the block, let it sit, let it absorb. Pull it up. Oh, that looks so much better. And let's do my little. I was going to say darker, and then I said better, and it kind of mixed together. And then let's do and you know what? I'm actually not too fussed with, I think my moon looks pretty good. So there you go. Look at how bright and crisp these are. Now it did take a couple of times, and you know what? So peacock, if I hadn't taken this out, I may do that a third time. As long as your paper is snugging into place, you should be able to stamp and stamp and stamp and stamp. Same goes for sentiments. If you had a sentiment on here, let me clean this up, and then I'll do a sentiment, and then I think that might be all I've got to share with you. So here's where I'm telling you it could stain, and it's okay. Oh, my stuff is rolling away. So here's where I'm just wiping. Wiping. And I could scrub till the cows come home. And these two are still going to change color. As long as I know they're clean, so I can do, if I want to test, here's my scrap piece. If I come over like this, oops, and they leave nothing behind, you know that they're clean. It's always interesting to go back to your stamp sets and see which ones are stained, see which ones are well loved, and see which ones are pristine, because those are probably the ones you haven't used. All right, sentiment. So let's get this put away. Do we have any questions? Is there any questions that I haven't covered? I mean, there's so much more I could share with you on stamping, and maybe we'll save that. Well, not maybe. We will save that for a future Learning Live, because we can get into random stamping, we can get into masking and layering, we could get into pigment inks like white. I think we're going to cover off heat embossing, which has a foundation in stamping as well. So once again, I've got my little sentiment here. Bring it over to grab it, and let's do this one. So again, I'm doing this, but oh my, I think it's perfect, but as soon as I go like this, I realize, oh no, it's not clean, it's not crisp, I missed a spot. Don't worry, nothing's gonna move.
If you're using colors, if you're using acrylic blocks, you'd be more careful.
Well, you say that, but sometimes no matter how careful you are, there are still mistakes. Now look at that. So there you go. Now the rest of these cards really are just about what my favorite author Stephen King would call secretarial work. It's about assembling, it's about arranging, but a lot of the basics are done. Whether it's stamping the background or the images, whether it's stamping the background, have to do a little bit of coloring, but we can put these all together. The key thing is we've had fun. We've played with colors. We've learned some stuff. And I'm going to leave you with one parting thought. When it comes to stamping, it is just paper and it is just ink. If you make a mistake, you grab another piece of paper and you try it again. Everything comes with practice, and the more you stamp, the more you practice, the better at it you're going to get. Sorry about that. So I encourage you to get out just one stamp set, 2 colors of ink and some white paper or some colored paper, and see what they will do. So unless there are any last questions for tonight, I think we will call it a night. I will finish up. I'm going to use this snowflake on a blue paper to create a background. I will finish that up with the houses. I will finish up our baddie card with this fabulous background, and I will post them probably in the morning to share with you. But I hope you picked up one tip or trick to get better at your stamping, and really the best way to do it is to just do it. So go create, go have 15 minutes of playtime with your stamps, and share with us what you make. We will be back here tomorrow night, and we will talk to you soon. Good night, everyone.